Doesn't matter who has the bigger game. The question is who needs to win. Kirk Cousins needs to win. If Kirk Cousins puts up ridiculous cartoonish numbers, as he did last year, as he did to an extent in Washington, and loses, fair or unfair, the world's not fair, he will get blamed. Quarterbacks get too much credit and too much blame and too much money. They are overpaid because of it. But that comes with the territory. Kirk Cousins put up numbers in D.C., but when he did, he didn't lead his team to greatness. He didn't win playoff games, get them there in advance in the playoffs. And so we've discussed this many times, Stephen A., empty calorie stats. You need, you're 3rd and 8, he'll get you 6. He's padding his own stats. He can't actually win in the end. Especially, he's replacing a guy, Case Keenum, who seemed to do just that. Won a playoff game with a miracle throw and actually got them there and was kind of an MVP caliber player. Now, you mean to tell me that Case Keenum happened to come along at a time where the Vikings offensive line suddenly played well? Remember, 2 years ago it didn't play well. Then they have Case Keenum. Wow, the offensive line's playing well, and now not so much again anymore in the defense and everything else? Kirk Cousins, fairly or not, will get blamed. Carson Wentz not only was he the MVP at the time of his injury 13 weeks into the season, but he led his team to the best record in the conference. They had home field through the playoffs because of Carson Wentz. No, they didn't win the Super Bowl with him, but they were in a position to because of him. People think of Carson Wentz as a winner. They realize he hasn't had a preseason. He's coming off injury. He's going to start a little slowly. He has to go through his reads quicker, the whole thing, as he gets his feet wet this year coming back from that injury. But Kirk Cousins, the label on him, Stephen A., is not a winner. He has to win. By the way, if they lose this game, 1-3-1, their season's over. Kirk Cousins got to win.
You're wrong. And here's why you're wrong. Because of timing. If you had said this before the season began, I'm not saying you didn't, but if you had said this before the season began, there's no argument. But after watching the Minnesota Vikings play thus far this year, after watching them a few days ago against the Los Angeles Rams, give up 556 yards. They haven't given up 500 yards or more in the Zimmer era. They haven't given up over 500 yards since 2011, but they gave it up last week against the Los Angeles Rams. And you had a coach that sat up there and said, excuse me, I recognize how potent the Rams are, but it's the same exact team that we limited a year ago. They haven't changed. Offensively, same guys, but look at what we're dealing with here. So when you look at it from that perspective and you're talking about guys getting burnt, when you're talking about Anthony Barr being isolated and coverage by Sean McVay on 3 of the 5 touchdowns where everybody that he was in front of suddenly ended up open, you have a situation where the Minnesota Vikings defense, which gave up 62 in the last 6 quarters of the playoffs, 24 in the second half to New Orleans, 38 to Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game, and then they come right into the season and they start right off where they left off, okay? That's the problem. The problem is the Minnesota Vikings defense. It's so glaring because there's such a glaring discrepancy between what they were throughout the regular season last year and their first 6 quarters of the postseason to what they were the last 6 quarters of the postseason that they played combined with this season. There's such a flagrant discrepancy that everyone has no choice but to look at the defense because Kirk Cousins was brought there to be the finishing piece on a championship puzzle. But now that we watch their defense, we know they ain't even contenders.
Look,
that's your problem.
But I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that it's not the defense. What I'm saying is Kirk Cousins ultimately will be remembered either as a guy who could win or couldn't. And he got all this money to win because when Case Keenum was there, it was working.
Your part. That's tricky in your part because you threw the word in there ultimately. Yep. So in other words, down the road, we'll look at it. What I'm saying is when this season is over, everybody's going to look at, damn, that Minnesota defense really stunk.
Everyone's going to say, do. In fact, you will be one of them, I guarantee you, who says, Kirk Cousins. We'll be sitting across from each other, and you'll say, Kirk Cousins. A lot of people questioned whether he was just getting his stats. This is the stuff I hear from players in Washington. Goes to Minnesota. They were loaded. They were supposed to win.
I've said that before.
Look, Peyton Manning was on a team with a bad defense. I know Bob Sanders, when he was on the field, was great. And obviously, Dwight Freeney was amazing. But that was a bad defense a lot of years. And Peyton Manning figured out a way to win, right? Because the offense was so overwhelming. When the line was good, when it wasn't good, whatever. Now, I understand that's a very high standard. I'm not saying Kirk Cousins has to be Peyton Manning. But you do have to. You got $86 million, $84 million guaranteed. The other guy who was just there had 26. How much has changed in a year?
Well, see, here's the problem, Max. And this is what I think you're missing. Yeah, Kirk Cousins had an issue with his numbers. He was about getting his numbers as opposed to winning. But the Redskins' defense was considered middle of the road. They didn't have the expectations that the Minnesota Vikings had placed on them coming into this season. We were talking about the Minnesota Vikings as a Super Bowl contender, particularly even when they had Case Keenum because of the season he had. They move him out. They get in Kirk Cousins. They give him $28 million a year. All eyes were supposed to be on Kirk Cousins.
Do it your way.
We were not supposed to be in a position where we're sitting there going like this, damn. We didn't know the defense was going to be this bad. They ruined it. If they had been they don't even have to be as great as they were last year. If they were just good, we could look at Kirk Cousins.
I'll do it your way.
But they're so bad compared to what they were a year ago. You can't ignore Minnesota's defense.
Okay, I'll do it your way. Now, look, if the Eagles blow them out and Kirk Cousins puts up numbers, I agree with you. People might look at it like that. But it's more likely,
not blowout,
as it usually is.
The Rams scored 38 on them, 38-31.
But what I'm saying is usually in the NFL, these games come down to a possession or two, right? If that's the case in this game and Minnesota winds up losing and Kirk Cousins has a big stat game as he did against the Rams, I guarantee you what people will say is not, well, it's not Kirk Cousins. He's putting up the numbers. Some people will make that argument, but most, including you, by the end of this season, and believe me, it'll be the end of this season, they lose this game 1-3-1.
Well, Max, I think you're absolutely
are going to say he puts up the numbers, but he can't win.
Wait a minute. You're absolutely right if the Minnesota Vikings are losing 24-21 and stuff like that. But if they're giving up 35, 38, 40 points, Max, that's not the defense that we grew accustomed to seeing. That's the problem.
You got to overcome it.
No, you got to stop somebody.
Yes, but who will be blamed? Ultimately, you think Mike Zimmer's defense is going to be blamed?
Yes.